Should we get into the U.S. men's national team?
Let's do it.
All right. I want to preface this because a lot has happened. I think pretty much everybody that listens to this show is into soccer, some deeper than others. But this is a story that, again, transcended the sport and hit the mainstream. And so everybody has kind of read and has an idea about the situation that came about over the last week involving the United States Soccer Federation, the United States men's national team coach Gregg Berhalter, his family, and other soccer royalty when it comes to the United States, which would be Claudio Reyna and his wife Danielle and his son, who we know was a part of the World Cup, in Gio Reyna in Qatar. I'm not going to read all of the different things that happened, so there will be paraphrasing that gets done here. And if you want to yell and scream at me about different things, yes. This is also an ongoing type of situation, whether it's the investigation that's happening or just, who knows what more is out there. And when the principals start talking more, as opposed to just putting out statements, we might find out more. For those that want a real quick refresher, Gregg Berhalter, out of pretty much nowhere last week, came out and put out a statement saying that during the World Cup, it had come to his attention that somebody was making him and or people at the Federation aware of something that he had done and an altercation that he had had with his then girlfriend, now wife, 31 years ago when they were in college together when he was 18 years old. The timing of this is interesting, and we still don't have clarification as to at what point during the World Cup did this happen. Now, this was a huge revelation and a surprise, and you read this statement from Gregg Berhalter, and you can go read it, and it reads like, during the World Cup, evidently and allegedly, our national team coach, Gregg Berhalter, was being directly or indirectly blackmailed about a story from 31 years ago. For those that didn't hear the story, and again, I'm just paraphrasing now, Gregg Berhalter and his wife, Rosalind, were in school together. They both played for the soccer team at UNC, and they were out. They were, out and partying and doing whatever. And at a certain point, he ended up kicking her. According to Gregg Berhalter, he sought counseling for it. The families were involved. Eventually, they got back together and obviously were able to reconcile and move past this. 31 years later, it is brought up. Have I paraphrased that correctly? Do you think, am I missing anything yet?
No, I think you've set it up properly. So
now we're, all hell breaks loose. Everybody's like, wow, this is crazy. How could this possibly happen? And it was completely out of the blue. And people have asked me, and I'm sure they've asked you guys were there. Did you hear any rumblings? The only rumblings that we heard were relative to Gio Reyna not playing, okay? And we're going to, the Reyna situation at that point when Gregg Berhalter comes out with this is not necessarily, that connection is not necessarily made. But the only rumblings that we heard during the World Cup about drama behind the scenes were relative to Gio Reyna and his not playing and his disciplinary action and all that. And some of that came out after the World Cup too. So what we've come to find out a few days later from Danielle Reyna, who is the wife of Claudio Reyna, who is also the roommate of Rosalind Berhalter, and they all went to school back in the day. We come to find out that at some point, according to her statement, because now it's statement versus statement, she contacted Ernie Stewart, who, by the way, if you're looking at this family tree, if you will, is a former teammate of both Gregg Berhalter and of Claudio Reyna, and I'm sure has known, as I do, and all of us within this soccer ecosystem, different people, including the principals involved here. And Danielle Reyna puts out a statement saying that she contacted the United States Soccer Federation through Ernie Stewart, a friend, after the, and for those that don't remember, Gregg Berhalter after the World Cup, gave what amounts to a TED Talk type of thing that was supposed to be private. It was about leadership, and he ended up talking about a situation the national team had where they had to discipline a player, and there was real talk about possibly sending him home and blah, blah, blah. At no point did he mention Gio Reyna, but you could read between the lines as to who this was. And while it was supposed to be private, it ended up coming out private. And Gregg Berhalter has since said that is something that he obviously regrets. But on the heels of that coming out, Danielle calls the United States Soccer Federation, Ernie Stewart, and says, hey, this is what I think happened. And through her statement, this is what I think happened. She probably calls Ernie Stewart and says, hey, this is bullshit. Your head coach now is dumping on my son. And look, we all can understand. Some of us can empathize because we actually have children. Some of us can sympathize because we can put ourselves in their situation and in their shoes of not wanting your kid to come in for unnecessary criticism, even though he or she may work in an industry where criticism is part and parcel. So she tells Ernie Stewart, this is BS. How could this possibly happen? Oh, and by the way, evidently, she drops, while Gio Reyna is being punished for something that he did as a teenager, did you know that your head coach did not suffer the same type of consequences in her mind relative to something that he did when he was a teenager? And then relayed this story. Again, you think that's a fair assessment of what happened?
I do.
Okay. Obviously, and again, this is what I think happened. Ernie Stewart probably said, oh, shit. Okay, now I've gotten this story. And in normal times, but especially in the age in which we live in right now, he says, well, I have to do my due diligence now, and I have to treat this as information that has come to me, and we have to not only investigate, but we have to get an outside source to investigate these allegations and see, if there was anything that we ultimately missed, because keep in mind, at this point, they're also going through the process of potentially bringing Gregg Berhalter back as the head coach. So I think that's ultimately how it all happened, and at this point, how it all stands. All right, because nothing else has come out since then relative to the principles involved here. All right. You all right, bud? You want to get a drink? It's okay. I know that was long, but I just wanted to set it up because some people have been, doing other things. And some people, normal people, recognize that in the greater scheme of things, this is soccer drama that they don't necessarily care about or want to have in their life. But if you're listening to this pod, I think it's part of your world. Okay, so I think my reaction was like a lot of people's reaction in that this was a sad and unnecessary self-inflicted wound. What makes it so sad is from here today on Monday, January 9th, and certainly there could be other revelations that come out, what this looks like is that a professional soccer coach, Gregg Berhalter we're talking about, didn't start a player in the World Cup because he didn't think that player was in his best 11. And in doing that, it resulted in a private and a personal and a painful story from 31 years ago involving him, Gregg Berhalter, and his wife. And it was shared to the world. And that, my friends, that is messed up. All right? There are ultimately no winners in this. None of the principals involved, none of the families involved, none of the ancillary types of individuals involved, and none of the soccer people involved. As far as, Danielle Reyna and her defending her son, I get that. But again, a coaching decision relative to a player in the World Cup versus a private, and as I said, personal and painful revelation of somebody that happened 31 years old, I don't think that those equate by any stretch of the imagination. And she's trying to equate those two bad decisions and those two situations. I just don't think that works. Having said all of this, Mosse, as sordid as this telenovela soap opera type of situation that we are in is, this too shall pass. Okay? I am an optimist. I believe in the future of American soccer. We are hosting a World Cup in 3.5 years, which is incredible. That is where all of our focus and energy should be in preparation on and off the field to make sure that we maximize that opportunity. And that should be the only thing that we are screaming and yelling about. Unfortunately, this is what not just the soccer world is talking about. But I don't know about you, but I'm getting calls from people that have no idea about soccer saying, dude, what's up with this? This is nuts. This is crazy. And again, there are probably more sides and facets to this to come out. The investigation continues on that Ernie Stewart started. And we come to find out that there were possibly more people in leadership positions at the United States Soccer Federation that were made aware of the situation with Gregg Berhalter and told about this. And so this will all ultimately be decided. Again, this is happening while Gregg Berhalter is potentially being considered to continue on for the national team. I think, as we said, nobody wins in this, including Gregg Berhalter. If he was under consideration before this all happened for the Federation, we have no reason to believe that he wasn't, to continue on, I think it's very, very difficult going forward, and it sucks. And he gets screwed in all of this to a certain extent because the Federation, especially given everything that's happened over the last few years and all of the different problems, it seems like there's another crisis every single month, they might just say, you know what, it's not worth it. It's not worth it. And it is too much baggage right now, and we just need to clean house. And so I'll leave you, and I want to hear your thoughts. If the intention by Claudio and Danielle was to not have Gregg Berhalter continue on as the United States men's national team coach because of the way their son Gio was treated in the World Cup. While this is not the way they necessarily wanted to get there, I think it still might end up like that. And that is amazing. It won't be without, incredible scars and lasting scars going forward for everybody involved. But Gio Reyna's not going anywhere. One of the great talents out there. And I hope that he continues to mature both on the field as a player and off the field as a young man. But he's going to be involved going up to the World Cup. And so he's not going anywhere. But it remains to be seen ultimately who is going to lead the U.S. Going forward. But this is sordid and ugly and, as I said, unnecessary. Mosse.
I mean, should we spin it forward at this point? I mostly agree with everything you said. I had my own thoughts, but otherwise the segment's going to be an hour if we...
I don't care. This is what people are talking about, Mosse. This is what people are talking about. It's okay. Don't you worry.
Now, listen.
Well, give me your thoughts.
I'm against violence towards women, obviously. I don't want to minimize.
Oh, way to go out on a limb there.
But it was over 30 years ago. She forgave him. She reached out to him. They got past it. They rekindled their relationship. They ended up getting married. They've been happily married for 25 years. They have 4 kids. Nobody suggests this was anything other than an isolated incident. Anyone who knows Gregg Berhalter today thinks he's a good family man. So for this to get dredged up in this fashion, I do find very off-putting. You read that Danielle Reyna statement, and yeah, she says, you criticized Gio for loafing in practice. You did something pretty bad at that age, too. That is a weird connection to make, a weird place to go, especially when you're dealing with somebody who's ostensibly one of your closest friends. I mean, the Reynas and Berhalters have been good friends all these years, so very bad on the Reynas' part. Berhalter, he did the worst thing out of anybody if you take it back 30 years, which is to hit a woman. But if we focus on the here and now of incidents relating to the 2022 World Cup. I question his handling of Gio, but it's sports stuff, coach and player stuff. There was nothing there that I thought was that inappropriate. Even the comments he made afterwards, people were so melodramatic about it. He's throwing a player under the bus. But, I mean, Pep Guardiola just called Calvin Phillips fat.
Right.
He was asked, why isn't he playing? Because he's fat. Let's go through everything Jose Mourinho said about his players to the media over the year. That stuff happens. It was not that big a deal. It does not justify what the Reynas did. So, very bad on their part. And, moving forward, the only thing I would say is I don't think Gregg Berhalter and Gio Reyna can coexist anymore.
You don't?
No.
Okay. That
would be too awkward. So if you think Gio is one of the 3 or 4 key players that this team's going to be built around in the coming years.
And many people do.
That does affect your decision of whether you retain Gregg Berhalter for another cycle, which, by the way, was already very much in question anyway. You and I both feel like a coach staying around for a second cycle is not ideal unless you have a very compelling reason for keeping him. I think Gregg Berhalter did a pretty good job. I don't know that he did that great a job that you would keep him for another 4 years. So it was sort of questionable anyway, and now this happens. So when you take all the different factors into account, I don't expect him to be the coach moving forward.
But if there was a good chance that he was going to continue on, and again, I think both of us, I've talked about how I don't care how well you do at a World Cup. I don't think you should have multiple cycles. But I do think that the Federation can make a compelling case that he did enough to continue on, at least for the next couple of years, and we'll see how it goes. But if that was the thinking and the notion a week ago, and then this comes out and completely changes it, that again, it's sad.
You like that clip? Well, my State of the Union podcast drops twice a week right here on my very own YouTube page. The only way to stay up to date is to hit that subscribe button down below. Size the day, and see you soon.